The night sky stretched endlessly over the Atlantic, a vast abyss peppered with stars that shimmered like ghosts over the restless waters. The MV Le Joola glided through the dark, her hull slicing the waves as she carried over 1,900 souls toward Dakar. Officially, she was meant to carry no more than 580, but few paid attention to the regulations. The passengers, men, women, children, entire families, packed the decks and cabins, clinging to hope, duty, and dreams of a better life in the city. Mamadou Diop stood near the ferry's railing, the salty air thick on his tongue. His arms rested on the chipped paint of the metal bar, and his gaze followed the moon's reflection on the undulating waters. He had spent the last 6 months in Ziguinchor working to send money home to his wife and daughter. Dakar awaited him now, a city of promise and reunions. Nearby, Aissatou cradled her infant son, rocking him gently to the rhythm of the ocean. Her husband was somewhere below deck, trying to carve out a comfortable space among the crush of bodies. She hummed a lullaby her mother used to sing, her voice a soft whisper against the groaning of the ship. Below deck, the air was thick and stifling. The scent of sweat and seawater clung to every surface. Lamin, a teenage boy traveling alone for the first time, huddled against the bulkhead, listening to the murmur of conversations around him. Some spoke of business in Dakar, others of family, waiting with open arms. An old man recited a prayer under his breath, his fingers tracing the beads of a worn-out rosary. Then, at 11 p.m., the first shift came. A gust of wind swept across the deck, stronger than before. The ferry rocked, not unusual, but something felt off. Mamadou straightened, his grip tightening on the railing. Another wave hit, harder this time. The ship tilted, not dramatically, but enough to send a ripple of unease through the crowd. Aissatou pulled her child closer, her heart quickening. She saw crew members rushing toward the bridge, their faces drawn with concern. A voice crackled through the speakers, an announcement meant to reassure, but the words were swallowed by the rising wind. Then came the wave, a monstrous swell, towering and merciless, crashed against the overloaded vessel. The Le Joola lurched violently, throwing passengers off their feet. Screams cut through the night as bodies tumbled across the deck, grasping for something, anything, to hold on to. Mamadou hit the railing hard, pain shooting through his ribs. He turned, eyes wide with terror, as he saw the angle of the ship shift further. Aissatou fell to her knees, her baby wailing in her arms. The ferry began to list. Within minutes, chaos erupted. Water surged onto the deck, dragging people with it. The ship groaned in protest, the metal twisting, surrendering. Below deck, the nightmare worsened. Darkness swallowed the space. As lights flickered and died, people clawed at the walls, desperate for an escape, as water gushed through the corridors. Lamine screamed for help, his voice drowned by the roar of the sea. Hands reached for him, pulling, pushing. But the force of the water was relentless. Above, Mamadou fought his way through the surging crowd. "Hold on!" he shouted, but his voice was lost to the wind. He spotted Aissatou, her eyes wild with fear, as she struggled to keep her baby above water. He pushed toward her, his feet slipping on the slick deck. The ship was almost completely on its side now. The screams of the doomed mingled with the furious howling of the storm. Some leapt into the ocean, choosing the uncertain mercy of the waves over the certainty of drowning within the ship's steel prison. Mamadou reached Aissatou just as a final, violent roll flipped the ferry completely. The world turned upside down. Bodies, debris, and luggage crashed into the sea. Mamadou barely had time to fill his lungs with air before the cold, merciless water swallowed him whole. Everything became a churning abyss. He fought against the pull, his arms thrashing, lungs burning. When he broke the surface, gasping, the ferry was gone, swallowed by the dark ocean. Around him, survivors clung to whatever they could find. Bits of wreckage, overturned lifeboats, cries for help pierced the night, voices rising in terror and fading into silence as exhaustion claimed them one by one. Mamadou searched frantically for Aissatou, for the child's cries, but all he saw were the endless, indifferent waves. Hours passed. The moon bore witness to the suffering below, casting its pale light over the floating remains of lives cut short. Mamadou clung to a wooden panel, shivering, his body numb. The sounds of the dying had faded, replaced by the relentless crashing of waves. When the first hints of dawn touched the horizon, hope flickered. A distant ship, the faint hum of an engine. But for most, help had come too late. By the time rescue boats arrived, only 64 people remained. Mamadou was among them, but Aissatou and her child were not, nor was Lamine, nor were Ulawa and 863 others who had set sail that night, never to reach Dakar. The sea had taken them.